No, I think I covered
Yeah,
it.
earlier.
I was kind of amazed at the paradigm shift that occurred once they understood the presupposition and
Yeah.
accepted the presupposition.
Yeah.
Things really did open up.
Yeah, excellent, because that's the thing you want to begin to watch when you're working with people, is that those little subtle cues. And one of the things we're going to do, it's going to be largely focused in the next weekend, beginning to expand your ability to pay attention to subtle cues. You'll be able to see things that you've never consciously seen before. So we're going to do a lot of work with that too. Jenny, what happened?
I don't feel like I had any really outstanding results, but I did get a wide variety of responses. Let's see, there was an older lady,
Where were you?
and she was sitting in front of a yogurt land or something.
Okay, over by where the...
By the restaurant.
Yeah,
where we
over
ate.
by
Just
Five
when we went
Guys.
out on the sidewalk, there was a strip mall.
Yeah.
So
Next
we were kinda
to...
going back and forth by
the
Paris
little...
Bakery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Forgot the
So
name
we
of the
talked to her and
naked burrito place.
Okay,
Okay, so you're talking to this lady.
yeah, talked to her and she just
What'd you say to her?
what did we say to her?
Thank you. We asked her the question of, so everything that is happening is perfect.
Oh yeah. We asked her.
Okay.
Yeah. We asked her about everyone being perfect and everything happens perfectly, and she said no, she
No
doesn't
way.
believe that at all.
They have the chance to change the outcome.
But they can
Yeah.
learn and change.
Yeah, so you get something that there's actually something pretty radical about that idea.
Yeah.
That's not even the normal way of framing reality for people.
Yeah, and I, honestly had kind of a hard time with that too, even leaving. And on the way there, I brought it up in the car. And I'm like, what do you guys think? Is everyone perfect and not broken? Because I'm just kind of like, I do think that, believe that everyone has their resources within them to accomplish anything or do anything. We're all kind of made that way. But due to experiences or whatever, we have these blockages that prevent us from accessing that.
Yeah.
And in my mind, that equals broken.
Oh, okay.
And I'm like, okay, so the two kind of conflicted.
Yeah.
But we talked about that a little bit more. And I think if I put it in the perspective of, at that time and in that place, are you operating, at your full capacity? And
Yeah.
if you look at it that way, then it's true.
There's that whole thing, and if I didn't believe that, what would be so? Well, I'd probably be judgmental about people. And if I were judgmental about people, boy, I really don't want to know that about myself. We get all those parts of the conversation that come up too. So you got that. Did you get another experience with somebody else? So you got a variety of
Yeah,
experiences.
I wasn't taking it to the point where I said, well, if you believe that, how would that affect, your communication or your perspective?
Yeah, like
The people I hadn't taken it that far.
not necessary
And
to.
when I got to that point, I'm like, okay, I need to remember to do that and introduce that. And then the next person I talked to was totally agreeable.
Yeah.
Just like, yeah, I believe that. And,
Okay.
okay, so I didn't get to practice that.
Well, you're thinking about it. That's good. Who's next? Who didn't get to go? Is that everybody? All right. How about, so we got one about the NLP conversation. So who'd you tell what NLP is to? Who'd you get a chance to explain NLP to or give a definition for?
The first guy we talked to, he was walking up to Paradise Bakery and he said, well, what is NLP? And I said, it's I do life coaching, and what it is it's a process that allows you to take your thoughts out, to look at them, to reorganize them, to put them how you want them, and put them back into your mind in a way which allows you to be successful in your life.
Okay, I like that. What was the response?
He was very excited about it, actually. He's the guy who said, oh, what are you guys doing? Tell me more about that. So he said I could see how that would work. In fact, he continued to talk to us as we walked from there across the way to the five.
That's great.
Five
Instant
guys.
rapport.
Yeah, it was actually.
Okay.
I didn't do that particular, I did the presuppositions.
Yeah, we didn't get your-
But I didn't do the other one, but I have done it before, because I would sit next to different people at dance class, And they would understand what property management is, and they'd say, then what does Bill do? And I would say, well, because it's hard to explain it, so I'd say, well, you know what, he trains the military intelligence and counterintelligence units, because it's one of the things he does. And they go, well, how does he do that? And I go, oh, he just brainwashes them. And that's how I was explaining it prior to today.
Yeah. We were at dance class, and all I saw was the response this guy had. He goes like that, and then he gets really excited. This look, his eyes get really open. He says, "I want that."
Yeah, he did. He wanted to be brainwashed.
Or wanted to know how to do it. One of the two. I couldn't tell which. All right, good. So NLP. What is NLP?
Well, we didn't have a chance to practice on anybody, but I was trying to think through my talk track in my head if I ever had the opportunity to. And I was going to try that whole, I was really liking that magic thing. It's something like if the conversation you sit down, whatever, and saying something like, what is NLP? Do you know what NLP is? And or what is NLP? And saying something like, well, it's magic. And they're like, magic? How is it magic? And
now you're working through this a little.
Right, I'm working through it. I'm like, well, what do you want it to be? Because I'm thinking the subjective thing. I'm picking up the magic on the subjective thing. What do you want it to be? I don't know. Well, is there something you'd like to change in your life?
Now you get a nice intro right into the conversation.
Is there something you would like to change in your life? Everybody's got something to change in their life, I'm sure. Well, NLP helps you pattern your behaviors to make changes in your life, basically.
It also opens you up to demonstrate, which is good.
So anyways, I have to get it down. It's something to be less scientific and just kind of draw interest and get to talking about it. And then you can get, if they want to hear more, get more scientific.
As quickly as possible you get to some sort of experience of doing it. Then you want to get really fast patterns you can do that don't take any time, or a lot of time anyway. Did you do this one, Emily?
Yeah, I broke it down with Jack. It was funny, we were going over definitions in class and everything, but when I got out there, I kind of froze being out there.
Yeah.
So I just broke it down to neuro-linguistic programming, just the definitions.
Yeah, you said that. Andy?
Didn't get an opportunity other than at one person.
All right.
No definitions of an.
Okay.
I tell everybody I know that it's just skills for understanding and influencing people.
Okay.
And it's
all right. So on the list, the next one is your list say map is not the territory?
I think, didn't we, every behavior is useful in some context?
Oh,
Did we do that one?
no.
Let's do that one. Similar to some of the others, so if every behavior is useful, what does that do for you?
It prevents you from judging.
Yeah? Yeah, so it doesn't matter what people are doing.
And there's some positive lesson in every experience that happen, even if it seems negative in the forefront. In the forefront, there's always some lesson and some positive thing to derive from that experience.
I like the fact that it says whether they produce the result expected or not.
Or not. And as you're saying, all behaviors are achievements. So if every behavior is an achievement, what does that do for you? Let's get that piece in there.
There's no way to lose.
Yeah, there's no way to lose.
It's a win-win situation.
Sense of accomplishment.
This is Tony Robbins talking about gaining 32 pounds in 2 months and living in a 600 square foot apartment in Venice Beach, California. And he's sitting there one day depressed and thinking, well, wait a minute. I've actually gotten this amazing result. I just gained 32 pounds in 2 months. I mean, what do you have to do to create that?
Success of some kind.
It's an accomplishment of some kind, if you view it that way. Because he goes, oh, well, I had to not move. Don't get around, move too much, because you can't accomplish the goal if you move too much. So what goal did you actually achieve? And you have to get a lot of food down your mouth in a really short period of time to be able to do that. So once he got that there was a strategy that led to a result, then all he had to do is go back and switch the strategy for getting to the result, and he's going to get a different result. So he got that. If he could do it with that part of his life, what other parts of his life could he do it with? So every achievement or every behavior is an achievement. When you begin to look at it that way, what else does it do for you?
Treats it maybe as a learning experience?
Yeah, it's all learning experience. They're all so. If there is no failure, which is another on the list here somewhere, if there's no such thing as failure, what would that leave you with?
Learning opportunities.
Learning opportunities,
Successes at varying degrees.
success at varying degrees,
Knowledge gaining.
knowledge gaining, and if there is no such thing as failure, so consider this, try it on. In your heart of hearts, you now know, absolute surety, certainty that you cannot fail. You just can't fail. What do you do differently in the way you're living your life right now?
We'll take risks.
You take risks. What else? What specific things are you going to do differently?
Embrace the moment.
Embrace the moment. And what else?
Breathe.
Breathe. Breathe deeply.
Look at all situations as various opportunities that you wouldn't
Yeah.
have presented themselves.
One of the characteristics I've found in my study of highly successful people is they, especially in the financial realm, they tend to be people that, regardless of what the situation is, doesn't matter what the circumstance is, they'll keep kind of turning it until they find a view of it that actually works for them. And then they take that one. So no matter how terrible the failure was, it's kind of Donald Trump. I mean, there was a point where he was about to lose the empire, and it looked very dark for the man for a little while, but somehow or another he kept turning all his assets around, looking at the relationships and all of that, and he just figured out a course of action and went for it. It actually worked for him. So he's still on top as best I can tell right now, regardless of the economy. He's doing well. So what else does it do for you as a NLP coach to believe that there is no failure, there's only feedback?
As the coach,
Yeah.
it helps calm your nerves when working with the client. You know, it helps you able to have the confidence to.
Yeah, so you actually get a confidence out of that because it doesn't really matter how bad it looks in that moment. You can help, you're going to communicate, you're going to keep communicating beyond the place you would normally have stopped or given up or whatever else.
Helps you with success.
So you stay resourceful and you get to the success. Anything else? All right, let's back up to the one we were on. Are we at?
The map.
Map is not the territory. We've talked a little bit about this already. So, corollaries to Alfred Korzybski. Who's heard of Alfred Korzybski? No takers. Where you would go back to is in philosophy, actually before the beginning of NLP, and there were a group of philosophers that were really interested in language. And that would include Ouspensky, Korzybski, Gurdjieff, and there was another, Hayakawa was in this group of people. They were fourth way philosophers, and they were all kind of in this direction that led to NLP. And I don't know for sure that Richard Bandler and John Grinder were studying these guys, and it would fit really well. If you read L. Michael Hall's books, there's one of them that really treats some of the basic concepts of one of those philosophers with specific about the language that they were using and how they were viewing it. So for this one though, if the map is not the territory, I think you got the basic idea of that. We're map makers. You're learning to be a good map maker with people. So with people are not their behaviors, how does that relate?
Well, when you're looking at people, if you're trying to make a map based on their behavior, it's an incorrect map.
Could be, yeah.
Because people are who they are, but they don't necessarily have a behavior that's related to who they are.
Right.
Because other things can get in the way and other things influence them, whether it's the parents or the school or philosophy or church.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. It could even just be circumstantial, but if you're taking and looking at somebody based on their behavior and trying to map that, it's not going to be necessarily
And
accurate.
sometimes people get their basic values out of whack with each other, and people will do things that they wouldn't normally do. I've noticed that around death of parents, that siblings tend to do just nutty things that would never occur in regular circumstances, but something gets triggered in those situations, and even their own values are so out of whack that it doesn't really make sense, doesn't seem consistent with the person they've been all their lives.
Yes, that's exactly what happened with my sister when my father died.
Okay.
She became like this other person, and we're like, who are
Where
you?
did that come from? And yeah, hard to understand that sometimes. And they have a positive intent and purpose too. So if the child is told you're a bad boy, I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, that you give the child, they would call it injunction in psychology. You've given him a message that he's a bad boy instead of this behavior doesn't work for. You're a good boy, and you just have a behavior that isn't a useful behavior. So let's work on the behavior instead. Allow people to be whole and healed.
And you're
Instead.
not imprinting them with that negative
Yeah.
connotation.
Because kids take everything literally. I mean, you're an authority, and it just goes right in past their little conscious filters. Oh, I must be. What are you going to say?
I was just trying to come up with an example so I could get my arms around this one as well. And I was thinking, well, what about a child who doesn't talk for many years earlier in their life, and all of a sudden they start spewing out a lot of communication, and most people on the surface would think that they're not a very smart child because they're quiet and they're not talking.
Yeah.
And then and actually, there's all this information inside the person that this
Yeah.
little child that just they've been taking in and listening of the world going on around them.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if that could apply to something like that.
Yeah, that's an excellent example. There was a treatment for autism that as they were able to get some autistic children to interact with a keyboard, they actually found that at least one child, and it sounded as if it was a much bigger group than that, and I don't know for sure what the research was behind it or the story, but this one child was actually writing quite exquisite poetry. I mean, very intelligent and just not able, up until that moment in life, to express any of that. But there was a whole functioning person underneath there. So, good example. Yeah. And that's one piece of it. If you have NLP coaching clients, there's even a more important, we do a negotiation course, and it's a more important persuasion and influence piece about it. That when you can separate the person from the problem, big thing is it helps you treat them differently, and you keep separating it. And people get it collapsed between what the emotional thing is and how bad you are in it if you're the person that they're in negotiation with. So they have a hard time separating out, this happened, and it's just an event, it's just something that happened. They've got it all collapsed with, and you're a bad person, you're evil, and you're trying to take advantage of me. So you've got to get that piece separated out somehow to have a successful negotiation. So just in a really practical level, you want to be able to make that distinction for yourself.
So how do you assist somebody who you're working with that is dealing with someone who is manipulative and does take advantage of people, but you're following these guidelines and you're trying to pacify the situation by allowing them to see things differently, but the person that they're dealing with really is not a good person, and that person can't be controlled, but the person you're consulting with or your client.
If we frame it a little differently, you've got basically a hard negotiator, somebody who's using hard move tactics.
Okay.
And in that particular class, there's about 14 primary hard move tactics, and the class actually gives you counter moves that are principled. counter moves, so that they're in alignment with a principled way of going about this, where you're actually honoring every person in the negotiation. So what if it's no longer a win-lose event, a negotiation, that everybody's interest can be satisfied, and you've got your job as the principal negotiator is to switch the game, get it out of that win-lose paradigm and into a win-win paradigm, at which point you have some chance. So it's a real specific model for actually getting that to occur. It's
And what is that?
counterintuitive.
What
I
did
call
you-
it total win negotiating.
Okay.
It's also modeled after the Harvard School of Law's negotiation project out of the 70s. The book you might want to pick up about it is Robert Fisher, and it's called Getting to Yes. Some of you may have heard of that. Yeah. So we modeled that particular body of knowledge that came out of principled negotiating from Harvard. Simplified it dramatically so that it's actually teachable. It's still a 3-day course. To really begin to get it, it takes me 3 days to do that workshop. We're going to hit on it briefly in this class and give you some of the basic skills that are in it. So be looking for those skills. There's an idea about negotiating that what we do is we chunk up to agreement and then we chunk down only as quickly as we can maintain agreement. That may sound a little jargony to you now, and we'll come back to it as we go along. So the next piece, the next part of that was language is a secondary representation of reality. We're kind of back to the map is not the territory. Does that one make sense to you? Is that easily understood? Some of these are a little bit like the Zen meditation. Okay, well, let's think about it a little more. Is there another piece I'm not getting here? So, language is a secondary representation of reality. It's the meta to the actual experience. I've got you over there, and I see the map I've got of you, and I'm playing with it, and I don't know for sure what the experience is. What I have is the secondary representation, which is the map. Is that helpful? Got any other ideas about it?
I have a perfect line from a movie. Jodie Foster in, what was that movie where she goes in the little spaceship and,
First
anyways,
Contact.
It's not is that First Contact?
something
She
like,
was on the
something
Contact.
like that. Anyway,
Oh, Contact.
she's being interviewed of her experience, and she's like, if I was a poet, I could be so much better at describing my experience.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so she still had that experience though, and it's
How do
it's
you-
in her mind, and she just can't communicate it.
Okay.
So it doesn't mean that it's not an awesome experience.
Yeah. Had to remember the part of the movie that is. Yes. All right, so the menu is not the meal. Doesn't taste anywhere near the same. Does that one fit? We're basically saying the same thing in different ways. People are not their behaviors. Everyone operates from his or her own unique model of the world. Is that the one that's next for you?
Definitely.
Just,
From
yeah.
experience, everyone's got different experiences.
People are individual.
And
Comes back to my pet peeve about the educational system. Treat kids as individuals, because we can. Next, somebody read it.
The meaning of your communication is the response you get. The intention behind the communication is not the meaning.
Okay, this one's huge. So if the meaning of the communication is not what it means, what happens?
Well, if you're not getting the response you're expecting, you need to look at your communication.
Okay, and what do you do differently?
Well, you analyze it and you reframe it.
Okay. You certainly take a few more steps in the direction of making sure that what you just said actually landed over there. Because at the moment, I think that what I just said is what you heard, I'm probably in trouble. Begin to think of it that way. Because chances are that's not what landed.
I think
Out of all the things that could be interpreted, what I actually was intending to say probably didn't.
I think in the nonverbal communication can play a big part in that because it
Yeah.
can change the message that was intended to be said.
Yeah. And sometimes even like tonality, sometimes the tonality you think you sent out is not the one that got heard. So people filter that through all kinds of filters.
Yes, they do. Could you elaborate on the intention behind a communication?
So it's just what we think that we just said something, we had an intention for what it was, how it was supposed to land.
Got it.
Often it doesn't.
The
So
first
how do you
part,
know?
I was wondering if something like a politician speaking of all these great things he's going to do, and so he gets voted in. So he got the response of what he communicated. He
Mhm.
got into office. The second part, there's something else. The intention behind the communication is not the meaning.
He had a good intention, and if
He had a good intention to get in, but he may not follow through on everything. He just wanted
there's
to
that,
get in.
yeah, that too.
Okay.
And he might have said something that
Right. Hit home for other people.
That-
He got into office, but he never really followed through on those promises.
targeted the constituency he was trying to get the vote from, and his way of, yeah. So
Now that
it's
can
not what
also-
people heard.
That can also be the fine line of lying.
Yeah,
That's-
yeah, can be.
You say one thing, but you do another.
Yeah. So if I say I'm going to do something and circumstances prevent me from doing it, is it a lie?
Now, I have another example. I was wondering if this would fit. Sometimes people call people, whether you're, they call you up, they start talking about something, but the true meaning of their call is the second thing they start talking about.
Mm.
Oh, and by the way, do you have that lawnmower I can borrow? I was wondering if that could fit for that.
Empathy cushion.
I don't know. I'd have to think
Yeah,
about it. It fits for something. I just don't know what.
If a tree falls in the forest.
So I've included some things in here that may not be in all the books you're going to read about NLP, about what are the presuppositions of NLP. In fact, there's a conversation out there about, well, where did they come from? Because not everyone agrees which ones are included and which ones aren't. I personally included the next one, which is there is a solution to every problem. Not necessarily true that there's a solution. And when I believe that there is, it shifts the way that I'm operating. So what would it shift for you?
Try and open those ways of trying to determine the good outcome that everybody wants.
Okay, so you'd work harder at finding ways that everybody's going to win. What else?
For me, that would be not ever giving up on anybody.
Yeah, you just don't give up.
Because you know there is a solution, you just haven't found it yet. It's not that this is a lost cause.
Yeah, okay, good.
With me, I'd be asking myself better questions and rephrasing that question.
Okay.
With different answers or possible answers to that problem.
Yeah. And again, you wouldn't give up so easily.
Absolutely.
Anything else about it?
It would improve my patience.
Yeah, you get more patient. Yeah. Excellent. I had one of my mentors was a really successful man and had a few kind of classic flaws. He believed in conundrums. You know what a conundrum is?
Unsolvable problem.
It's an unsolvable problem. Now he had like 4 or 5 patents. He invented something that had to do with the Sabre system that lands airplanes at airports and all of that. He did all these amazing things, millionaire a few times over, and he believed in conundrums. Now he may actually have scientifically found things that had no solution. However, the belief in a conundrum is a whole different idea, that even in those situations it may be that we just haven't found a solution for it yet. There are mathematical problems that we know should have solutions, and they have gone for years and years and years without a solution to them. Some of them are really complicated. The better our computers get, the more of those get solved finally, but they're conundrums only as long as they're conundrums. So.
Well, that's like Einstein's equation for gravity. Quantum physics professors have redone it a gazillion times and the answer is infinity, which is not an acceptable answer
Not an acceptable
in quantum
answer.
physics. So basically they're saying his equation doesn't work.
His equation doesn't work.
So, you know, does it work, doesn't it work?
There's been a few things that he came up with that they've gone through a similar process with and come back around to, oh, he was right, at least in this way.
I would ask the question, well, isn't the fact that there is no solution, isn't that a solution?
It could be, yeah. Good point of view. Good thinking.
And I think you
Not
said
everybody would get to there.
this man was a very successful man and he had a few flaws.
Yes,
But, you know, people work perfectly.
Yeah.
And no one's broken,
yeah.
so.
Yeah. So I'll reevaluate that. For who he was and where he wanted to go in life, he did perfectly well. What?
I don't know if this fits again, but a solution, let's say it's a negative solution, actually. For example, let's say somebody's being foreclosed on their home, it's a negative. So actually the outcome though in the end will be that they'll be free of those mortgage payments. So there is a positive to that, that's the end result. So it starts as a negative, but they will be free of something. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, you got both ends of it, yeah. So if you can turn any situation around to where it serves you, that would be useful. So this whole idea I was talking about with a group, and somebody said, oh, that's Jacob Needleman's work. He's an ethicist, so I wrote it down. So there's the source of that idea. So we talked about it, there is no failure, there's only feedback. So if something's not working, do something different, vary your approach until memory and imagination use the same neurological circuits and potentially have the same impact. This one you want to think about a little bit. I sometimes say that, well, a lot of what I do as an NLP coach with people is help them learn to imagine differently or more effectively. So we all have the ability to imagine. Of course, I've had a couple of clients who seem to be very black and white thinkers. It was very difficult for some people. Some people may not be as visual as others, for example. So it took me 3 sessions with this one guy to get that he was about pain. I forgot exactly what the issue was. That he could imagine a situation that he could then put himself in. He could imagine cold even though he wasn't experiencing cold on his foot right now. Even though it wasn't physically there, he could imagine it, and his body would actually respond in a way as if it had been there. So it took me a little while to get him to that idea that he could actually accept that, because I finally found one example, and then we could expand on that one example. At which point he could learn to control his pain. He had had a back operation that got splotched. If you put a newspaper in his lap, he had excruciating pain. His body was sending the wrong message. But the question was, how do I mitigate the pain? Pain's there for a good positive intent and purpose. It's doing something for you. And in this case, it was a misread of it. So what do you do with it? Well, what if you could manage the pain as well with your mind as you do with it was morphine in this case. He had been medicating himself. He was really good at it. He knew exactly where the line was between addiction and non-addiction. And he had been playing that little line for a while, and within a really short period of time, he was able to wean himself off the barbiturates and snap his fingers and be in a state of pain relief that had gone from an 8, 9, 10 to maybe a 2 or 3. Imagination. So memory and imagination use the same neurological circuits and potentially have the same impact. This one will probably keep coming to you through the course. Anything else you can think about it right now?
So if you work on imagination, your memory will improve.
Well, yeah. Perhaps. Or vice versa.
Yeah. Okay.
So, holistic approach to it. Next.
Any project can be accomplished by anyone if it is chunked down sufficiently and sequenced properly.
You want to attribute this one to John Grinder. So anything can be achieved. It's a pretty big statement.
I would just say that sometimes when I'm, feeling overwhelmed with something, it's easier to just take down the pieces of each, when you're getting
Yeah.
overwhelmed, project by project.
Yeah.
Activity by activity, because if you look at the whole, it's like too much, like where do I begin?
We get overwhelmed pretty easily with only 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information that we can consciously pay attention to. And when you can let that go, your unconscious mind can take in lots of information all at once. So the idea that you could build an elevator from the earth, attach it to something, and take it into outer space, like the space shuttle, I mean, how crazy does that sound?
Kind of crazy.
Kind of crazy, and they've actually figured out how to do it. It's the Bucky
Bucky
molecule?
Fuller.
Bucky what?
Bucky Fuller?
Well, Bucky Fuller's where it came from, but the multihedral molecules, carbon molecules, can be worked into a filament that actually creates like a cable. And I don't know how far they are along with this project. It's in the making. And it tethers to the earth somewhere, and there's this thing that goes up into all the way through the outer layers into the stratosphere, and it's just so lightweight you can do it. And now they can take platforms and like an elevator, just pull them all the way up into outer space. What
With
an
a
interesting
molecule.
idea. Huh?
With a molecule.
Well, it's the molecules.
A series of molecules.
Yeah, that are built
The
into
bundle.
a
It's like a
a
DNA
carbon
strand or something.
dehydral something or another.
Interesting.
I
Sounds
forgot
like
what
Willy
the
Wonka and the
language.
chocolate factory with the elevator out the.
Yeah, all the way up.
Wonkavator.
The Wonkavator. So somebody figured out how to do that. It's like, well, how do you build a pyramid?
One block.
Aliens.
Yeah, you got to break it down somehow. You first have to get the idea of it. Next.
Oh, we have more.
Changing the process of how we experience reality is more important than changing the content.
Yeah, we'll let you think about that one for a while. Anything you want to say about it now?
Well, everything we do is how we experience it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like even your response to something, it's not the situation, it's your response to it. So the same thing holds true here. It's like how we experience reality is more important than what's really going on in reality.
And there's a way we think about things in our culture that's a little more, especially in Western culture, that's a lot more based in the why. Well, why does that happen? And you notice how thrown you might be into asking this question. However, if you want to get accomplishment, success with things, it gets to be way more important if you can figure out how. So there's a preference in NLP for asking the how question, because that's how you get behavior modeling. Figure out specifically how somebody does it, why might be important, and yet how is the thing that's going to give you the strategies for the whole behavior. There might be a piece that's why. So all distinctions about environment and behavior can be usefully represented through the 5 senses. And we talk about the difference between I've been talking about how we tend to interpret versus sensory specific language. And last night we started out with a little bit about the idea of the meta model or precision model. We get more precise, or we get more vague with it, more in the interpretation of it. So there's that distinction as well. Anything else that comes to mind, like an insight into this one? Can usefully be described through the 5 senses, which are visual, auditory, feeling, smell, taste, all of that. So we'll leave that one hanging there. Mind and body affect each other. There is no mind, there's only body. Wait a minute. Reverse that.
Integrate that.
Yeah. There is no body, there's only mind. Both things seem to be true, and there's always a relationship between the two. So anything that occurs in any part of a system will affect the other parts. It's that whole idea of the gestalt of it all. The law of requisite variety, who can say what that is?
I was just gonna finish, but also Chinese medicine with the meridians connected.
Yes.
And that's part of that.
So say more about the meridians.
Oh, in the Chinese
Yeah.
belief of how all the meridians are connected and different nerves or whatever, you can probably better
With
see
organs
this,
in the body. Yeah.
that affect different organs in the body, right?
Okay, and whole systems are along these lines, and the energy that you stimulate down here affects up here, that
Right.
kind of thing.
Right, there's a reaction from, there's
Yeah.
a connection.
And that's all connected at different levels of our experience. So mind, body, spirit, the whole thing.
And then one could also, there's also the whole, some folks believe in that cellular memory stuff,
Yes.
where the cells are, and I think we spoke to
And
this
intelligence.
yesterday with, but that was like talking to the cells were talking to the mind and shutting down or whatever. But
Yeah.
cellular memory is actually, the cells are in, they're memorizing things. And then there's those that believe that this carries on.
Uh-huh.
I mean, if that's true, then we live forever.
Yeah.
Through
So
our
as you're breathing,
Parents, grandparents, our children, their cells being carried down,
Yeah.
and they're memorizing things from
Ancestral.
ancient times, ancestral.
DNA
Okay.
coding.
So,
and in the room right now, there's some cell floating around that was Einstein's cell, and we can all share it together.
no, I mean passed down from maybe your
Yeah, in your
ancestry.
own
I don't know.
genetics, yeah. So that whole blueprint, you know what happens when you've had a
DNA
cold,
again.
you had a specific kind of cold or flu, and your body has produced antibodies
Right.
to that particular thing. Once it has, do you know what happens to the levels of it when you're no longer sick in your body?
Dissipate.
Yeah, they just sort of go away. The white blood cells are no longer measurable for that particular thing after a little while. But if you're exposed to it again, it just starts generating. The blueprint stays in there, and it's not like something that's that easy to go in and measure. Well, where are these things? I'm not sure that we have a good answer for that. So cellular memory is a theory of how all of that gets carried. So the law of requisite variety, though. The person with the most choice wins.
That's like being a chameleon in your environment. You adapt.
Okay. Yeah, it's adaptation. The person who creates the frame around any given conversation has the best chance of influencing it. Inherently, more choice is good.
Create folders on the fly.
There you go.
Yeah.
Nicely put.
So if you can't, you must.
The chocolates.
Act as if. All right, so turn the page. We've talked a little bit about associating. All learning is a process of associations. If you start talking about trees, you could start almost anywhere here. Trees make paper, right? So you got newspaper, you got print, you've got stuff that works off of print, like the guy with the little music thing going on there, or a menu or whatever he's got there. Well, if you're at a restaurant and it's a menu, then you got coffee, you got coffee beans, you got coffee makers, you've got mechanization, and you need to run that in some way, shape, or form, and you've got the computer card that goes back in the computer. All of that's related to learning, and you can make associations from here on. The pathways through the brain and nervous system for almost any behavior are not necessarily exactly the same pathways every time you think of a thought, because we make all kinds of connections. It's where this lateral thinking test you took this morning comes in, because it gets you thinking in ways that aren't the ordinary ways of thinking. You have to get outside the box to get lateral, and it's all about associations. What got hooked up? What got hooked up? What got hooked up? Same experience happens to two twins, and one goes, whoa, this is really fun. If I can do this, if I can accomplish this thing based on the challenge I was just exposed to, I can do anything. I can become president of the United States. I can do whatever else. And the same event happens to the other twin, and he goes, oh man, that was terrible. I'm just being bombarded. I'm the victim of all this stuff, and I've got another set of beliefs that derive from that, derive from that, derive from that. You got totally different experiences, and it's all a choice when you get right down to it. Sometimes it doesn't occur to us as if it had been a choice. Take a moment on page 13. Write the names of 3 people that we'll call mentors, somebody for whom you have high regard and you think they have some skill or ability or something you'd like to model. Doesn't have to be a perfect person. It could be an actor, it could be anything. So who has abilities that you'd like to emulate?